The room fell silent as Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett walked into the Capitol Hill hearing chamber, her navy blue pantsuit contrasting sharply with the polished wood of the committee dais. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo sat at the witness table, his face already flushed with anger from earlier questioning. What happened in the next few minutes would shock the nation and change American politics forever. Just moments before, Pompeo had pounded his fist on the table, voice booming through the chamber. "Congresswoman, these accusations are baseless. You Democrats just can't stop with your witch hunts." The outburst sent murmurs rippling through the gallery, but Crockett remained eerily calm, a thin folder clutched in her hand. The Harvard-educated lawyer and Texas representative had been preparing for this moment for months. While Pompeo continued his tirade, believing his CIA background and political allies would shield him, Crockett silently placed a single document on the table. "Mr. Secretary," she said, her voice cutting through his shouting, "I have something here that might refresh your memory." The room froze. Pompeo's eyes dropped to the paper, and for a split second his face drained of color. This wasn't just another congressional hearing. This was the moment when Jasmine Crockett, armed with classified documents that had mysteriously found their way to the Oversight Committee, was about to dismantle the carefully constructed image of one of Washington's most powerful men. Before diving into this explosive confrontation, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our breaking political analysis. Now let's see exactly how Crockett turned this hearing into a career-ending moment for Mike Pompeo. Mike Pompeo had arrived at the hearing with the confident swagger of a man accustomed to power. As former CIA director and Secretary of State under President Trump, he'd faced hostile questioning before and always emerged unscathed. His reputation as a Harvard-educated lawyer, West Point graduate, and tough-talking diplomat had made him seemingly untouchable in Washington circles. The committee room buzzed with tension as he took his seat. This was supposed to be a routine oversight hearing on foreign policy decisions, but rumors had circulated for weeks that something bigger was brewing. Several news outlets had published vague reports about concerning activities during Pompeo's tenure, but without concrete evidence, these stories had gained little traction. Pompeo's supporters packed the gallery. Conservative media had been portraying him as a potential presidential candidate, someone who could restore America's strength on the world stage. His recent memoir, Never Give an Inch, had been a bestseller, further bolstering his image as a straight-talking patriot. Across the dais sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, relatively new to Congress but already making waves. The former civil rights attorney from Dallas had quickly earned a reputation as someone who came meticulously prepared to hearings. While some dismissed her as an upstart progressive, those who had faced her questioning knew better. Her legal background made her particularly dangerous to witnesses who tried to evade direct answers. For weeks, Crockett had been working with whistleblowers who had approached the committee with troubling information about classified operations during Pompeo's leadership at the CIA. Unlike previous attempts to hold Pompeo accountable, this time there was documentation, internal memos that had been quietly declassified through proper channels. Today's hearing isn't just about policy disagreements, the committee chair announced. It's about accountability at the highest levels of government. Secretary Pompeo, you've been called here to address specific actions taken under your leadership that may have violated both U.S. law and international agreements. Pompeo smiled dismissively, leaning toward the microphone. "I've served this country faithfully for years, including as Director of the Central Intelligence Agency and as Secretary of State. I've always acted in America's best interests, and I'm proud of my record." The stakes couldn't have been higher. If the documents Crockett possessed were authenticated, they wouldn't just end Pompeo's political ambitions, they could potentially lead to serious legal consequences. For Crockett, this represented a chance to prove that no one, regardless of their power or connections, was above accountability. In the gallery, journalists from every major network sat poised, sensing something monumental was about to unfold. What they didn't know was that Crockett had secured the cooperation of 3 former CIA officials who had worked directly under Pompeo, each ready to corroborate the contents of the documents if challenged. As the initial procedural matters concluded, Pompeo sat back in his chair, the picture of relaxed confidence. But those paying close attention noticed his eyes continually darting to the thin folder in front of Congresswoman Crockett, a folder that would soon upend everything. The questioning began with other committee members covering standard topics: foreign policy decisions in the Middle East, negotiations with North Korea, and relations with European allies. Pompeo handled these with practiced ease, occasionally throwing in barbs about the current administration's failure to project strength on the world stage. As her turn approached, Crockett remained focused, reviewing her notes and occasionally passing messages to her staff. The room sensed the shift in energy as the chair announced, "The gentlewoman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes." "Thank you, Mr. Chair," Crockett began, her voice measured but firm. "Secretary Pompeo, I'd like to direct your attention to events that occurred in March 2018, specifically regarding Operation Midnight Horizon. Are you familiar with this operation?" Pompeo's expression hardened slightly, but his voice remained even. "Congresswoman, as you know, I can't discuss classified operations in an open setting like this." "I understand that concern," Crockett replied smoothly, "but portions of this operation have been declassified through proper channels. I'm only referring to those declassified aspects." "I don't recall any such declassification," Pompeo countered, his voice taking on an edge. Crockett nodded to a staff member who approached with a document. "For the record, this is Declassification Order 2024-J103, signed by the current CIA director 3 months ago. It specifically allows discussion of certain aspects of Operation Midnight Horizon in appropriate congressional settings." She passed the document to Pompeo. Pompeo glanced at it briefly. "I'm not in a position to verify this document's authenticity." "That's fine," Crockett responded. "The committee has verified it. So let me ask again. Were you aware of Operation Midnight Horizon during your tenure as CIA director?" The tension in the room escalated as Pompeo shifted in his chair. "I was aware of many operations. Without reviewing classified files that I no longer have access to, I can't specifically recall every operational name." "Let me refresh your memory," Crockett pressed. "Operation Midnight Horizon involved surveillance activities in 3 European allied nations without their knowledge or consent, potentially violating both Executive Order 12,333 and agreements with those allies. Does that help your recollection?" Pompeo's face flushed. "Congresswoman, you're venturing into dangerous territory here. Intelligence activities are complex, and sometimes difficult decisions must be made in the interest of national security." "So you do recall the operation?" Crockett asked, saying that, hypothetically, certain operations might require extraordinary measures. "Mr. Secretary," Crockett interrupted, "I'm not asking hypothetically. I'm asking specifically about an operation you authorized." Pompeo's patience visibly thinned. "Congresswoman, I've sat through a lot of these hearings. This line of questioning seems designed for political theater rather than substantive oversight." Crockett remained unruffled. "Let's try a different approach. Are you familiar with a CIA officer named Thomas Reeves?" The color drained slightly from Pompeo's face, but he quickly recovered. "I worked with many dedicated officers during my time at CIA. I don't recall specific individuals without context." "Mr. Reeves served as Deputy Chief of European Operations during your tenure," Crockett continued. "He directly oversaw Midnight Horizon. On December 12, 2018, did you receive a memorandum from Mr. Reeves expressing concerns about the legality of certain aspects of this operation?" "As I've said, I received countless memos." "It's a simple yes or no question, Mr. Secretary," Crockett pressed. Pompeo's composure cracked. He leaned forward, voice rising. "Congresswoman, you're cherry-picking information without understanding the full context of national security decisions. This is exactly why these matters are classified." Sensing his growing agitation, Crockett pressed harder. "Mr. Secretary, I have here a copy of that memorandum." She held up a document with several redactions. It states, and I quote, "The current surveillance parameters exceed legal authorization under both U.S. law and existing agreements with allied nations. I formally request immediate review and modification of operational directives. Did you receive this memo?" The gallery erupted in whispers. Pompeo's attorney leaned over, whispering urgently in his ear. "I need a moment to confer with counsel," Pompeo stated, his voice tight. "Of course," Crockett replied. As they whispered, she continued reviewing her documents. After a brief consultation, Pompeo returned to the microphone. "I may have received such a memo among thousands of others. If I did, it would have been reviewed by appropriate legal staff." "And what action did you take after receiving these concerns?" Crockett asked. "Any operational concerns would have been addressed through proper channels." Crockett nodded to another staff member who distributed documents to committee members. "What I've just shared with the committee is a directive dated December 15, 2018, 3 days after the warning memo, in which you personally authorized expansion of the very activities Mr. Reeves flagged as potentially illegal." For the first time, Pompeo looked genuinely alarmed. "Where did you get that document? That appears to be classified information." "As I mentioned, Mr. Secretary, these materials have been properly declassified for this hearing." Pompeo's composure fully broke. He slammed his hand on the table, voice rising to a shout. "This is outrageous! You're taking isolated documents out of context to create a false narrative. You have no idea the threats we were facing, or the critical intelligence these operations provided." The chair banged his gavel. "The secretary will control himself, or this hearing will recess." Pompeo ignored him, pointing angrily at Crockett. "You Democrats just can't stop with your witch hunts. This is nothing but a political hit job because you're afraid I might run for office." The outburst sent shockwaves through the room. Journalists frantically typed on their phones. Committee members exchanged glances of surprise. Through it all, Crockett remained calm, letting Pompeo's outburst hang in the air. She waited until the room quieted before speaking again, her voice softer but still carrying clearly through the chamber. "Business. Mr. Secretary, no one is questioning the existence of threats. What concerns this committee is whether proper legal procedures were followed. But since you've raised the issue of context, perhaps we should provide exactly that." She opened the thin folder that had been sitting before her since the beginning of the hearing. The folder Pompeo's eyes had repeatedly drifted to with growing concern. "I have here the full operational review of Midnight Horizon, including the intelligence yield analysis." She looked up, meeting Pompeo's gaze directly. "Would you like to know what it says about the actual intelligence value of the expanded surveillance you authorized against our allies?" Pompeo fell silent, his expression a mixture of fury and growing apprehension. "The operational review, completed 6 months after your expansion authorization, concluded that the expanded surveillance yielded no actionable intelligence of significant value to national security interests," Crockett stated, reading directly from the document. "In fact, it specifically notes that the most valuable intelligence from the operation came from the originally authorized components, not from the expanded activities that Mr. Reeves had flagged as potentially illegal." The room had gone completely silent. Even Pompeo's most ardent supporters in the gallery seemed stunned by the specificity of the information. "But that's not the most troubling part, Mr. Secretary," Crockett continued, turning to the next page in her folder. "What's truly concerning is what happened to Mr. Reeves after he raised these concerns." She pulled out another document. 2 weeks after submitting his memo questioning the legality of your directives, Mr. Reeves was reassigned from European operations to a desk position analyzing agricultural reports from Kazakhstan. A man with 20 years of field experience and fluency in 5 European languages was suddenly reviewing wheat production statistics? Pompeo shifted uncomfortably. "Personnel assignments are made based on agency needs." "Indeed," Crockett interrupted. "And I have here Mr. Reeves' performance reviews for the 3 years prior to his reassignment." She held up several pages. "All exemplary," his supervisor noted, and I quote, "one of the most effective operations managers in the European division. I'll demand at least 1 month adherence to the MPO policy, decreed, and punish neo-Caesareanism. If he fails in any way, he would be dismissed from all adventurism. All demands fear, consistently demonstrates excellent judgment and strict adherence to legal parameters while maximizing intelligence collection." She looked up. "Does that sound like someone who should be analyzing wheat production?" "Congresswoman, individual personnel decisions..." "Mr. Secretary," Crockett cut in, "I'm not just talking about Mr. Reeves. I have documented cases of 3 other CIA officials who raised similar concerns about operations during your tenure. All 3 experienced abrupt reassignments or negative performance reviews within weeks of voicing their concerns. She turned to a staff member. "Please display Exhibit C." A screen at the front of the room illuminated with a timeline showing the names of 4 CIA officials, their dates of raising concerns, and their subsequent reassignments or performance changes. This pattern suggests that officials who question the legality of operations faced retribution under your leadership, Crockett said. "Would you like to explain this pattern?" Pompeo's attorney again leaned in, whispering urgently. Pompeo nodded, then addressed the committee. "I categorically deny any suggestion that personnel decisions were made as retribution. The CIA regularly rotates staff as operational needs change. Let's move to something even more specific," Crockett said, pulling out another document. "On January 28, 2019, you received an official legal analysis from CIA General Counsel regarding Operation Midnight Horizon. The analysis concluded, and I quote directly, "The expanded parameters authorized on December 15 likely exceed existing legal authorities under Executive Order 12333 and may constitute a breach of agreements with allies in the affected regions." She looked directly at Pompeo. "The very next day, you signed a directive continuing the operation unchanged. Can you explain why you disregarded this legal advice?" The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. The chair banged his gavel repeatedly. Pompeo's face had gone from red to pale. "That analysis would have been one of many inputs into operational decisions." "Secretary," Crockett interrupted, "I have here your written response to that legal analysis." She held up another document. "You wrote, and I quote, 'Legal concerns noted but overridden due to critical intelligence requirements. Continue as directed.' Your initials appear at the bottom." She passed the document to him. "Is this your handwriting, and are these your initials?" Pompeo stared at the paper, his attorney again whispering frantically in his ear. After a moment he looked up, his expression now carefully controlled. "It appears to be my handwriting, but without seeing the full context of all related documents, I cannot confirm the circumstances under which this note was written." "The context is quite clear from the paper trail, Mr. Secretary," Crockett responded. "But perhaps the most damning evidence concerns what happened afterward." She pulled out the final document from her folder. "This is a transcript of a meeting between U.S. officials and representatives from the affected allied nations, after they discovered these unauthorized surveillance activities. One allied intelligence chief stated, 'This breach of trust has set our cooperation back years. We cannot share sensitive intelligence with partners who spy on us behind our backs.'" He looked up. "The damage assessment concluded that the broken trust from this operation actually harmed intelligence gathering far more than any benefit gained from the expanded surveillance." Crockett let the information hang in the air for a moment, then continued, "Mr. Secretary, the picture these documents paint is troubling. You received multiple warnings about the legality of this operation, ignored them, expanded the operation against legal advice, reassigned officials who raised concerns, and ultimately damaged vital intelligence relationships with allies, all for an operation that produced no significant intelligence value, according to the CIA's own assessment." She leaned forward. "This isn't about politics. This is about the rule of law and the proper functioning of our intelligence community. If officials can ignore legal constraints without consequence, our entire system of checks and balances fails." Pompeo, now visibly shaken, conferred with his attorney again before responding. "Congresswoman, you're presenting a selective narrative based on incomplete information. Intelligence operations involve complex trade-offs that can't be fully appreciated without complete context. I stand by my record of protecting American security interests." "Mr. Secretary," Crockett replied, "I've been very careful to provide context. In fact, I've now submitted for the record 17 additional documents that paint a consistent picture of what happened. But perhaps you'd prefer to hear directly from those involved?" She gestured toward the back of the room, where 3 individuals had entered quietly during the exchange. "The committee has secured testimony from Mr. Reeves and 2 other former CIA officials directly involved in Operation Midnight Horizon. They are prepared to testify under oath about these events." Pompeo turned to look at the 3 individuals, recognition dawning on his face. For the first time, he appeared truly rattled. "Mr. Chair," his attorney interjected, "we request a recess to review these new developments and determine appropriate next steps." "Congresswoman Crockett, do you have further questions before we consider a recess?" the chair asked. "Just one," she replied, turning back to Pompeo. Mr. Secretary, given the documentation showing you knowingly authorized activities that your legal counsel deemed likely illegal, that you apparently reassigned officials who raised concerns, and that your actions damaged critical intelligence relationships while producing no valuable intelligence, do you still maintain there was proper justification for these decisions? The room fell completely silent, all eyes on Pompeo. After a long pause, he leaned toward the microphone. I have always acted in what I believe to be the best interests of the United States, he said carefully. But I request an opportunity to review these materials with counsel before responding further. Of course, Crockett replied. But I should note that all of these materials were provided to your legal team 2 weeks ago, as required by committee rules. Pompeo exchanged a sharp look with his attorney, clearly surprised by this information. The chair banged his gavel. We'll take a 30-minute recess, Secretary Pompeo. I strongly advise you to confer with your counsel about the seriousness of these allegations. As the committee members began to rise, Crockett remained seated, organizing her documents. Pompeo stared at her across the room, the confident swagger completely gone from his demeanor. In its place was the look of a man who suddenly realized he had severely underestimated his opponent. Journalists rushed from the room to file breaking stories. Within minutes, news alerts began pinging on phones throughout the Capitol. The careful image Pompeo had crafted over years of public service had begun to crumble in just 30 minutes of questioning from a congresswoman armed with documents he never expected to see the light of day. When the hearing reconvened, the atmosphere had dramatically shifted. Pompeo's demeanor was subdued, his attorney now doing most of the talking. Rather than the combative figure from earlier, he appeared calculating, measuring each word carefully. Mr. Chair, his attorney began, after reviewing the materials with Secretary Pompeo, we wish to make a brief statement. The Secretary acknowledges that Operation Midnight Horizon involved complex decisions made under significant pressure. While he maintains that his primary motivation was national security, he recognizes that reasonable people might disagree about the appropriate balance between security imperatives and legal constraints. The carefully worded statement, neither a full admission nor a denial, did little to stem the tsunami already building outside the hearing room. Within hours, Pompeo Files was trending nationwide. Cable news channels ran breaking coverage with legal experts analyzing the implications of the revelations. Former intelligence officials appeared on panels, most expressing alarm at the apparent disregard for legal advice and the reported retaliation against officials who raised concerns. By evening, 3 major newspapers had published detailed analyses of the hearing, with headlines like, "Former Secretary of State faces allegations of illegal operations and retaliation," and "Pompeo confronted with CIA documents showing potential legal violations." The political fallout was swift and severe. Conservative outlets initially attempted to defend Pompeo, calling the hearing a partisan witch hunt, but their arguments faltered as more details emerged. The documentation was simply too specific, the timeline too damning to dismiss. 2 days after the hearing, additional whistleblowers came forward with information about other operations that allegedly followed similar patterns. The House Judiciary Committee announced it would open its own investigation, while the Senate Intelligence Committee requested a classified briefing on the revelations. Pompeo's carefully cultivated image as a potential presidential contender crumbled rapidly. Political donors who had been courting him began distancing themselves. Her scheduled appearance at a major conservative conference was abruptly canceled, with organizers citing scheduling conflicts. Former allies in Congress were notably silent, declining to defend him in media appearances. Those who did comment offered only tepid support, with phrases like "waiting for all the facts" and "everyone deserves due process." A week after the hearing, the Justice Department confirmed it had opened a preliminary review to determine whether a full investigation was warranted. Legal experts noted that knowingly authorizing intelligence activities deemed illegal by counsel could potentially violate several federal statutes. Pompeo's memoir, which had been selling well, plummeted in sales rankings. His publisher indefinitely postponed a planned paperback release and book tour. Television appearances were canceled, speaking engagements withdrawn. For Congresswoman Crockett, the aftermath brought both acclaim and challenges. Progressive supporters hailed her as a hero who had held power accountable. Conservative critics accused her of grandstanding and endangering national security, though these criticisms largely fell flat given the documented damage to intelligence relationships revealed in the hearing. 3 weeks after the hearing, a detailed profile in a major national magazine chronicled how Crockett had built the case. Working with committee investigators, she had spent months quietly gathering documentation, securing declassification of key materials, and building relationships with whistleblowers who had previously been afraid to come forward. The article revealed that the breakthrough had come when one of Pompeo's former legal advisors, troubled by what they had witnessed, provided a roadmap to the paper trail. From there, Crockett had methodically followed every thread, eventually compiling the devastating dossier that she unveiled in the hearing. In a television interview, Crockett emphasized that her motivation wasn't partisan. "This isn't about Republican versus Democrat," she explained. "It's about upholding the rule of law. No one, regardless of their position or power, should be able to disregard legal constraints without consequence. Our system depends on accountability." The consequences extended beyond Pompeo himself. The revelations sparked renewed debate about oversight of intelligence agencies and the recourse available to officials who identify potential legal violations. Several legislators introduced bills to strengthen whistleblower protections, specifically for intelligence professionals. The State Department and CIA initiated internal reviews of their procedures for addressing legal concerns raised by staff. Both agencies issued statements emphasizing their commitment to operating within legal parameters and protecting employees who raise legitimate concerns. For the intelligence community, the episode represented a significant moment of reckoning. Senior officials privately acknowledged that the cultural message that raising legal concerns could damage one's career had been deeply harmful to proper functioning. 6 months after the hearing, a comprehensive report from a bipartisan commission established to review the allegations confirmed the essential facts Crockett had presented. The report concluded that Operation Midnight Horizon had indeed exceeded legal authorities, that officials who raised concerns had faced career repercussions, and that the expanded surveillance had produced no significant intelligence while damaging critical relationships with allies. The Commission recommended several reforms to prevent similar situations in the future, including strengthened legal review processes, enhanced whistleblower protections, and more robust congressional oversight mechanisms. Pompeo himself largely retreated from public life. His presidential ambitions effectively ended. He resigned from corporate boards and canceled scheduled appearances. This story, as a whole, sources close to him indicated he was focusing on mounting a legal defense against potential charges. In Washington circles, the Pompeo hearing became shorthand for a career-ending moment. A cautionary tale about the dangers of assuming power shields one from accountability. Political operatives studied Crockett's methodical approach as a masterclass in effective oversight. For everyday Americans, the episode reinforced both cynicism about power and hope for accountability. The fact that someone as powerful as Pompeo could be brought down by documented evidence of wrongdoing suggested that perhaps the system could work as designed when wielded effectively. A year later, as the legal proceedings against Pompeo continued to unfold, Crockett reflected on the hearing in a rare personal interview. "I never set out to end anyone's career," she said. "I simply believe that the American people deserve to know whether those entrusted with power were using it appropriately and within legal constraints." She paused before adding, "What happened afterward, that was the consequence of Mr. Pompeo's own actions, not my questions. In the end, the documents spoke for themselves." The interviewer asked if she had a message for other public servants who might be considering coming forward with concerns about potential wrongdoing. "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "The system only works when people of conscience are willing to stand up and say, 'This isn't right.' It takes courage, and there may be personal cost. But that's how we preserve the rule of law and the integrity of our institutions." As the interview concluded, the journalist noted that Crockett's approach to the Pompeo hearing had fundamentally changed how oversight was conducted in Washington. Other committees had begun adopting her methodical, evidence-based approach, moving away from performative questioning toward substantive accountability. That, Crockett said with a slight smile, might be the most important legacy of that day. Not what happened to one former Secretary of State, but how it changed the way we think about power and accountability in our democracy. The revelations from that historic confrontation between Pompeo and Crockett continue to reverberate through American politics today. What began as a routine oversight hearing transformed into a watershed moment that reshaped careers, reformed institutions, and reminded the nation that no one, regardless of their power or position, is above the law. If you found this breakdown of political accountability fascinating, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth analysis of the biggest political showdowns. Hit the notification bell to make sure you never miss our latest videos exploring the most consequential moments in American politics. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in our next deep dive.